Okay, I'm here in Mexico City in the zinoteca from Museum del Chopo with the curator of the zinoteca, and that's quite a unique thing, Enrique Arriaga.
Hi there.
And the zinoteca is, I think, a very unique thing in a museum, and you should tell me what it is. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
we're starting. We started like a year ago, a series of shows that display self-published material, mostly fanzines, but also uh, uh, regular magazines that, in a way, involve a certain non-official or underground cultures,
Yeah.
and 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 the whole issue of the project dealt with making a big collection of fanzines, but we believe that it's hard to kind of like hold or get the hand of all this uh, mass production of fanzines. So
Yeah.
we decided
Mass
to.
productions? You mean like how big are the?
I mean, there's a lot of people doing scenes that we're trying to
Okay.
contact, but it kind of dilutes or it kind of fades in and they, I mean, some are published like in, they're like 5 or 6 or even like really small pressed
Okay. Yeah.
material, so it's hard to get a hold of it, but there's a lot of people doing it.
O-
So
So, but why? Can you tell something about? Because what's interesting, I think, is that this all these scenes are very related to the history of this building. So,
right.
could you tell something about before this was a museum of contemporary art? If I understood well, this was the heart of the punk scene in Mexico City
Yeah,
a long time ago. Yeah, can you tell
yeah,
something about
like
it?
yeah, around that time, like around 75, when it became, when the building became a university, a part of the University of Mexico, and it started to show visual arts. It was like when it started getting like this all these underground scenes being gathered here. I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is that there was a specific program here that was called, like, it was like a band competition
So
of
there were
like
a lot of
rock.
bands playing
Yeah,
festivals.
yeah, that was like around the early '80s,
Yeah.
and they also decided to invite to organize a tianguis, which is like a market, but it was more like a trade market
Yeah.
where you would bring records and trade with other
Okay.
people, and that was the start of it all. I mean,
But the building is huge, so these concerts were very big, or how should I see it? Because this museum, if I, it could host like 5,000 people.
yeah, no, there were small scale. I can
Okay.
show you some pictures of that, because you could see how it was. There was a stage organized downstairs. I mean, this thing we're standing on right now didn't
Of course,
exist,
yeah.
so it was only like the first floor, and they would have like different things, activities. For example, they would have an exhibition on this part of the building, and on the north part of the building, they'll have like a small stage with
Yeah.
with
So,
some.
but so there was a very live punk scene in Mexico
Oh
City.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was punk, but it was also like youth cultures. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a lot of punks. We celebrated here like in the mid '80s. The it was called the punk jornadas, or and they would host talks and concerts
Okay.
and exhibitions, and it was just to show like the
But
punk scene
talks and
production.
exhibitions, I never heard about that in
Yeah,
European or American punk scene.
yeah, and that was like in the mid '80s. I mean, by then
Yeah, yeah,
punk
yeah.
scene was
Okay. So
pretty
yeah,
old,
yeah,
but
yeah.
but yeah, but yeah,
But it was in Amsterdam. You had this squatter scene. Was also like, yeah, punk and also art. So it's kind of like that also.
yeah. The thing was, like, this museum hosted lots of unorthodox and non-official cultural
Yeah.
production. I mean, there was rock, there was gender issues being, like, we had the festival of sexual diversity here,
Okay.
which in the beginning was only a week. But we also hosted like experimental and concrete poetry
Okay.
festivals. So there
And
was
it
all
was
this.
also international.
Yeah, well, it tried to be international in a way. I mean, there was a lot of support from the museum back then to make like a sort of
Okay.
like this being like social, sort of like a social network project. I mean, in order to connect people
Yeah.
from the local scene to people from abroad, and that was sort of like the profile of the museum, being sort of a space where they showed stuff that wouldn't be able to be shown in other institutions or in other cultural institutions. So it was very permissive.
So it was like, so the university provided the underground scene of a home.
Yeah, sort of like a platform,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, it was an institutional.
And how was so did the university had a very kind of leftist voice? I mean, that's because I mean Mexico has been yeah, despite the revolution, is not very. I mean, I know that Mexico City is very different from the rest of this
Right.
country, but and I know that, for example, a lot of people don't know that it's. I think Mexico City is after Holland, the second country where they had gay marriage introduced.
Yeah, we have
Only
a
in
very
Mexico City, but it's still like
liberal.
interesting.
Yeah.
So that it's a very liberal city, and the university has been very important in that.
Well, that, being liberal or being left wing, it's very recent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's barely like it's been like more than 10 years,
Yeah.
more than a decade that the city has been on governed by the left party here in Mexico.
Okay. Yeah.
Before that, there was a lot of repression. I mean, during the 80s, these people had to the people that were doing scenes had to use pseudonyms or they had to hide their identity because they were afraid of being
Okay. Could get arrested.
prosecuted. Yeah. So
And so there are stories about the punk scene that, or people who publish scenes that were.
yeah, especially like some radical, because by then anarchism,
Yeah.
which was more like an intellectual sort of movement here,
Yeah.
was becoming sort of like blended or connected with the punk scene. I mean, punk here was pretty much different from other places. I mean, the way punk started here was more from the bands, like the gangs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, Panchitos was a very famous gang, and they
A
sort
gang?
of a gang, like a gang of people,
Okay.
like like gangsters. I
Yeah,
mean, not
yeah, yeah.
gangsters,
Like LA gangs.
like
or
yeah,
something.
yeah, sort of like.
But
that.
then punk.
Yeah, but they were like urban, um,
But
sort
not
of like-
around the music. Not surrounded like.
Well, they consumed different music, but then they started listening to this music that came from a more like well established economical part of the society
Okay.
that were bringing. I mean, young people that were bringing this material like Sex Pistols and
Okay.
Ramones and all that. And that's how they started to know this music, because it
So
wasn't played on the radio.
so yeah, because actually I don't know anything about the Mexican punk music. So how would you say it's more like American inspired or more British inspired, or would you say it's totally Mexican and you can hear cumbia influence and
Not really. I mean, what happened then is that they didn't want to deal with the past. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't want to have any relationship with the past.
Okay.
So they wanted the new. I mean, it was like a very avant-garde mentality. They wanted the new and what was young, and they hated whatever was old.
Yeah.
So there was a rock scene in Mexico, but it was very. I mean, it was more like Elvis Presley.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
like
Yeah.
and the Beatles oriented rock, and the new people, the young people, didn't want to deal, or they didn't want to hear.
And
that.
how did so I mean, how did people get informed about music?
Well, it was here in this museum.
No,
at
but
the
was there a
market.
radio station or?
There was a few radio
Yeah.
stations, but it was basically more by this trade market
yeah.
and fanzines and just hand to hand, word
Yeah.
to word. That was the way music was being distributed,
Yeah.
and also that's the way you could get to know other bands that were not like the mass market
Yeah.
bands, that
And
were-
the Mexican punk bands, were there like big in Mexico or also like
well, at the
in the US or?
No, they were very local. They were
Yeah.
very urban. There
Yeah.
was because there was a difference. There was the very like low class punk
Cheap.
bands,
Yeah.
which as I said before, were related to these gangs that were
Yeah.
really punk.
Yeah.
They would use punk or the A of anarchy,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
they didn't even know what it meant.
Okay.
They would just
It
only
was
use
more like an identity, or almost
Yeah.
like a fashion thing.
Yeah, it was sort of like
like
fashion.
rich kids being a gangster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of. But this was
Nowadays,
like
yeah.
the poor people. I mean, they were gangsters in a way.
Yeah.
They had their gangs and they would rob people and stuff like that. But they started feeling, you know, it kind of like matched very well the punk scene with their scene because it had sort of like the same
No future
attitude.
ID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the same marginalized,
Yeah.
the same, you know,
And
attitude.
so you mean you said that it was mostly like people from like poor background in the punk scene.
Well, there was that sector, and there was also like the middle upper class that had the opportunity to fly
Okay.
or to buy records in
Yeah, yeah,
certain
yeah.
record shops
Yeah.
that would import this music, and they had their bands and they had this good equipment, and they were the ones that started disseminating the punk scene from abroad. I
Yeah.
mean, punk from Britain, people would travel and
Yeah,
they'll,
yeah,
they'll,
yeah, yeah,
they'll
of
bring
course.
all the style,
Yeah.
and these people would copy them. And the places where they would meet, there were these alternative places where they would play rock, and it was very underground because the law prohibited those concerts.
Okay.
But there was also like the museum and the market of El Chopo, which was born out of the museum, where these people would have contact. So there
Yeah.
was like a blend or a mixture of different, you know, social statuses
Yeah.
that were just, you know, communicating or having interaction in this space,
Yeah.
and also sharing material, you know. And for example, there was this guy, and they were all like their names were in English. For example, Ely Bleeding, and he was one of he calls himself one of the first punks, right?
Okay.
And also or Size or
Yeah.
Dangerous Rhythm.
And what were the names of the bands?
For example, in Mexico, and they still exist, we have Rebel de Punk.
Okay.
And
That
but
sounds very.
yeah, and it's very urban, and it's
Okay.
a old school punk rock.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's or urban as well.
Yeah.
You can tell by the way they play. And there's also El Síndrome or El Síndrome del Punk,
Yeah.
Punk Syndrome.
Yeah. These
there-
are the early
Yeah.
70s, late 70s punk bands.
yeah,
And they're still around.
they're still around.
So
yeah.
there's still like a punk scene, you could say.
Yeah, they-
Or is it more like a bit like?
There's like the old school, and they all, in a way, it exists here in the city because there is an economy.
Yeah.
Because there is a market, and some of them
course.
are still, you know, selling stuff,
Yeah.
selling bootlegs,
But
or,
it's still
or
underground.
patches. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of under. I mean, it's hard to hear like a radio station
Yeah.
playing that music.
Yeah.
And there's like this urban rock, punk oriented,
Yeah.
or more like this. There's also like in the in the mid '80s, there was like this wave of hardcore punk or
Yeah.
hardcore, which is more, as I said, related to anarchism
Yeah.
or to specific political movements.
Okay.
And from there, there's a few bands as well, like like Suicide Sect of the 20th century, Secta Suicida del siglo XX. And nowadays there's like a younger generation
Yeah.
of punks which are more into basically, and these are the ones that are, you know, middle class, but they're more oriented into like other genres, also hardcore or trashcore or death, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, there's, I mean, the scene is still active, and there's sort of like, I sense there's sort of like a dispute between the old school and the new school.
Yeah.
I mean, the old school have a different way of understanding punk, and here you could see. I mean, I'm not a specialist, but that's what I could sense by doing this research.
Yeah.
You know, like I see, for example, that the new guys that are doing scenes do not get along really well with the veterans. You know,
Yeah,
They're,
of
like,
course,
they have
yeah.
like differences, and also because there's a lot of nostalgia around the old days. you know?
Yeah, it's always like that.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. It's not so interesting, I think.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not really.
So here I wanted to go. Here I see this magazine. It has what's his name? Jose Posada.
Jose Posada.
Jose Posada, a very famous print artist
Yeah.
from the revolution, from the Mexican Revolution, and yeah. So I was thinking, you know. So if I look at all the punk scenes you show me now and from the last 30 years,
Sure.
and then if I look at Posada, I'm like, okay, is there You think could we see this tradition of zines in a wider perspective, historical perspective of the Mexican Revolution and the art of Posada?
Yeah, I think the thread that binds them is like this political attitude. And I would like to make like a small parenthesis and talk a little bit about this magazine
Yeah,
because, for example, this what you showed here of Posada, it's sort of like at the tournament. I mean, I mean, it's an original engraving. I mean, but what it has here is just different names to call gay people.
yeah. This
So
is a gay magazine from
this
1980.
yeah,
Yeah,
and this is an earlier version. The first number, it only came out like three different issues.
yeah.
The drawings are made by a well-known curator from Mexico,
Okay.
and this was this is one of the first political and gay activist collective that started self-publishing
Yeah.
material related to gender. But I mean, what happened with Posada, he was very involved in left and liberal movement,
Yeah.
and he was also very involved with the Magon brothers, who were like this this they were part of, or they started the anarchist political party,
Okay.
and they would print their propaganda at the Taller de Gráfica Popular,
Yes.
which was headed by Posada and a few others. It was like that space was very interesting because they were doing all this political cartoon
Okay.
and and very national oriented images.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Catrina is by Posada, and it's given like a full image of the Day of the Dead in Mexico
Yeah.
City, right? I mean, and not in Mexico City, in the country.
Yeah.
But so there was, like, we could say that the first fanzines were the newspapers that the Magon brothers were publishing, because
Okay.
afterwards, when people started calling their material fanzines, which was like in the late 70s,
Yeah.
some of them had the background of the Taller de Gráfica Popular,
Yeah.
and all their political propaganda.
Okay.
And some, even, for example, the new guys, for example, Hot Dog, they're publishing, or they're doing some work, or they were residents at the Taller
Yeah.
de Gráfica Popular. So there's, in terms of political orientation, and also in terms of the treatment of the image, and the way certain iconographies are rescued, either in experimental comic books, and in in punk scenes, and in anarchist newspapers. It all comes from this tradition
Yeah.
of this workshop.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Because this workshop, what they printed, it was it was also a lot of clandestine stuff that was during the revolution illegally or secretly
right.
distributed.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of similarities with the
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying when I'm talking about like this lower class young people that felt sort of like identified with the punk scene, because they also felt represented. I mean, in a way, these people, even though they were artists or intellectuals, and they came from another demography, they were talking about the mystery in Mexico, and they were talking about a different way of understanding the people that didn't have opportunity. So they felt identified with this sort of graphical production, and in a way, these guys, the, the, the people from the neighborhoods, from the periphery of Mexico City, were sort of like represented, and also felt, in terms of political orientation, identified
yeah
with the political posture of the workshop of Gráfica Popular, right? So, I mean, in a way, that's why punk in Mexico sort of like fitted in, and sort of like blended with that level of society, and also that's why it became so it diffused, or it got propagated, or it was so successful and popular in the what we call here the belt of misery, which is like the whole periphery of the
Yeah.
city, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's still growing, and where punk concerts and events are more popular
Yeah.
are always like in this as I said, the belt of misery in Mexico.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the biggest, because they feel identified.
Yeah.
And with this I mean, that's why the way the graphic workshop was called popular graphic. And what it means here, the connotation of popular, it doesn't mean pop, it means
No.
like the,
Yeah.
the
But now you're talking about 1890 something, no? With the Stale Popular from Posada. When was that exactly?
well, that was in the early 20th century.
Okay.
But I mean, a lot of people kept on producing, or I mean, he was one of the first ones who established the workshop. But it's still, the workshop still exists.
Yeah.
So
Oh, really?
yeah.
And what are they printing now?
Well, for example, I mean, they're not doing much interesting stuff. But for example, the guys from Hot Dog, the new guys, were using their workshop to print their stuff. Like,
So so zines from now are being printed in the same place where Posada.
yeah, I
That's
don't-
really interesting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not really active anymore.
No.
I mean, it still exists, but they're not doing anything
Yeah.
interesting anymore. But I mean, what I'm trying to say, it's a lot of generations of artists
Yeah.
with a specific political orientation
Yeah.
were producing stuff there. We have a few of them in the collection here in the museum
Yeah. Nice.
that comes from the Gráfica
Okay.
Popular
Could you show
workshop.
them maybe?
Yeah,
Or you don't have them?
we don't
Okay.
have them here.
Okay.
It's on the vault. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so but then it'd be nice to talk more about today's zine,
Yeah.
because you do here like every 2 months you do exhibition of thematically around Mexican zines.
Yeah.
You've made 4 so far, no? Or
Yeah,
something
we've made
like that.
4, and we're on our 5th one, and yeah, I mean, the objective. I mean, this is the 5th one.
Yeah.
The objective is, first of all, to to show this to the
Wider
museum's
public,
audience.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's
And also
necessary.
to public that normally, contemporary art scene is not the same as the zine scene.
Yeah,
right? So,
I mean, I think this is more. It comes from a place that deals with amateurism, that deals with inexperience, and that's also more of like the word of the people that are culturally productive, but they're not interested in art.
Yeah.
But I think they share some elements. I mean, there's an intersection between some repertories that art are interested in. I mean, I could sense now that there's a lot of young people that came from art school and that are drawing in a certain way that comes from a punk tradition.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that certain figures are used, the way certain the attitude, and the way that style filtered into art.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's very conscious.
Yeah. So from the contemporary zines that we've collected, so you told me that most of them are made by people around 25, maybe the oldest one is 27. You told me.
Yeah.
And so are these people in art school, or are they music scene, punk scene, or?
I mean, it's very varied. They're not really interested in contemporary art. Even one of them went to art school.
Yeah.
But I've
Dropped out.
Yeah.
The art school dropouts.
Yeah. He's not interested in art. He's not interested, even though he's showing some of his work, some of his paintings in art galleries. He doesn't really care about the art world or theory and academia and all that. They're more into like this very visceral, very more like contemporary culture in terms of the visual
graffiti,
culture.
maybe.
Yeah. But
because that's also something that. I mean, it's a different subject, but it's also interesting to see that there's this tradition. Because, of course, graffiti is all over the planet now. But here in Mexico, of course, you have the muralist history that is far before graffiti started in the 70s in New York. So here you have, so it's in a way you have also here, you have some graffiti and muralist that are like, you know, kind of continue on that tradition that's way older than the graffiti that the world knows. So
Yeah,
that's also interesting.
that's a very interesting reflection.
Yeah.
I mean, we have strong roots,
Yeah.
but in terms of as a country, I believe there's a lot of historical amnesia.
Yeah.
So I mean, every time we're looking about what's being done in Europe or in,
Of course.
or in
Yeah.
the States, and a few are really noticing that we have like this stuff like from the past that we could relate to, and that's very similar to what is done like in other places, and that was done later.
Yeah.
You know, so that's very interesting as well.
Yeah.
And for example, in this project, we've come to the fifth edition, and our plan is first of all to make a collection of scenes, so we can make like this sort of like a temporal splice of time, and be able to, for researchers or people in the future, to be able to access to these materials, because as I said, there's a lot of people, I mean not thousands, but there's a lot of people producing this stuff, but it's not being like recorded or preserved.
Yeah.
So
of
it's
course.
gonna vanish
Yeah.
pretty soon. So that's part of the project. I mean, to keep it and to have it here for future research. And also we want to do the shows because we want to activate this area, which is a reading room that's just in front of where we are
Yeah.
right now, and this space is part of the museum. It's another.
Yeah. Let me
museum.
show it.
Yeah, it's sort of dark.
Oh,
right
it's a
now.
bit dark now.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
Too
another
bad.
time.
Yeah. I can ask for the lights to be
Oh,
turned
it's
on.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, it was a place that was being misused. Or
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing going on. I could see a lot of people coming up here. So I say, why not, provide people with material that could be interesting,
Yeah.
and that if that it's because of its precariousness, if it's stolen, we don't mind. I mean, if someone takes I mean, we don't want them
Yeah,
to
yeah,
take
yeah.
it, but if they
Yeah.
take, that's why we publish like every show has like a mission
Yeah.
of at least an edition of 1,000 or more
Yeah.
copies, and they're given away.
Yeah.
So if people want to take one, they can take a specific scene that's made for the show,
Yeah.
and that's commissioned for the guest artist or sinister or collector. We hardly have any artists. I mean, there's no artists doing fanzines.
No.
There's a lot of young people
Yeah.
that are coming out of art school that are using this technique
Yeah.
or this resource. So the point is, the project involves three exercises. One is the production of a commissioned scene specifically for the show. Then what they do is they show their previous work as a sinister or
Yeah.
the previous publications, and they also make a selection of their collection,
Yeah.
and that's what they show, and that's what's on display. And afterwards, when the show is over, this becomes part of the collection of
Yeah.
fanzines at the Zinoteca. And the important thing is that we want people to experience or to get to know these materials, but also to be motivated to make more. Because what we're interested more is in people to produce, and we're interested in the new production. We're also collecting old stuff. We have like this the weight of history specifically in this museum, because
Of
as I
course,
said, it
yeah.
was related to all this. I mean, I think this material started circulating here like 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're also interested in what's being done now. So we have open calls for people to produce new stuff.
Yeah.
Today, for example, a girl brought 3 scenes because she wanted her material to be part of the collection. And we're not being very selective in terms of what we're collecting. We're just receiving whatever people are willing
Well,
to
yeah,
share.
like a library. I
Yeah.
mean, like library.
Yeah, it
So-
has this very open and very relaxed
Yeah.
spirit, And for example, what you have right now here is part of the second
This is
edition.
this is a unique
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
it's sort of like a collage. And
Yeah,
it's part of like
This is from the gay zine show. all
yeah,
this stuff. Yeah.
the fanzine,
Yeah.
the queer and gay fanzine production. In Mexico, we realized there wasn't any gay publications here.
Yeah.
So we decided to make an open call, and we received a lot of collaborations, new material just published just for this occasion, and that's part of, as I said, that's part of the whole intention of the project is to motivate people to produce new material.
Yeah.
And, and also to sort of like explore the scenes where this self-published material emerges from.
Yeah.
That's, I mean,
because now the scenes you showed me, where are they distributed? Is there like a few shops where people can find them, or is it really like so small, like at concerts, still like it used to be, like?
You mean the first ones or the
no, the later ones, the contemporary stuff?
Oh yeah, well there's certain shops more for like the most established sinisters. They're, for example, the Hot Dog were the first ones that we started the show with, and after the show they started getting a lot of offers from different places and stuff like that, because they do a really good work.
Yeah.
So and now you could find them like in certain shops, but they decided to keep it like DIY, and they want to distribute it hand to hand.
Yeah.
And that's the ethics that they work by.
Yeah.
And for example, Inez, the other case, she's really interested in like promoting her work, so she sends stuff to Quimbis in Chicago, and she's sending stuff to different parts of the world.
Yeah.
She has her clients, so she's more like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And the other guys who are more amateur, they're still like very underground. You could tell they don't care about doing like professionalizing that. They just wanna, if they feel like drawing something, even though it's not well drawn, it's just like an impulse.
Yeah.
So there's like different levels and different like attitudes towards scene production nowadays. And what I think it's interesting is like we could trace back where that roots come from and show these people, the Sinisters, or have a space for concentrated for this type of material, and to see where sort of show like a wide perspective within our capabilities of what's being done, and the treatment and the way it's circulated, and as I said, like the scenes or the certain subcultures where this stuff emerges from.
Yeah.
I mean, in for example, for Anal Archive, which was the second edition, the gay and queer fanzine, we wanted to establish a connection between the old magazines that have been published, because we said, well, there was some attempts of people doing like gay magazines, but there isn't any people doing gay fanzines in a more amateurish way. So we wanted to make a crossover between the original, like, because they all have the same self-published attitude, and maybe generate like a sort of like a tension between this term of, is there actually like a gay scene or a gay movement in Mexico, or is it all now dissolved and there's like lots of people doing stuff?
It's mostly online probably.
There's no need to self-publish, but there's it's different. It's a different approach if you have it online than if you have like handmade or physical printed material that you could browse through.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think we have like half an hour of something that we talked.
Okay.
I think it was interesting. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I put my foot in my mouth.
No, I don't think so. We'll check it. Otherwise, we do it again.
All right.
Okay.
Let me know.
Okay.